and putting in a way of intolerance. We are going into Muslim literature and Sufi literature, which is the most opening and tolerance in literature. In the there was the main author in Ateísmo in Islam, which opened a lot of things, was Averroes, Ibn Rushd. He was in Cordoba in the 11th century. Ibn Rushd and Ibn Sina, Avicenna, which this Averroes, he was a student of Aristotle. All the Western philosophy comes through Muslim authors to Western tradition in the old Muslim Spain, because of the way of intolerance. We are going into the Muslim. It's been recorded. Well, there was the main. Okay. Averroes, he was the main rationalist in Islam. No? Through Aristotle, he tried to make rationalism in religion. No? And he was so much criticized by this that even in the end, his books and his thinkings were forbidden completely in Cordoba. Even he was almost slaughtered about in the Muslim Inquisition because of this. No? And he opened to the European thinking, Aristotelic and rationalism. He opened to St. Thomas of Aquino. It was all based in Ibn Rushd, in Averroes, no? Which his main challenge, his main question was saying that he was talking about the non-eternity of the soul, which before it was the theme, the issue of the soul and eternity of the soul was admitted like to be, and he questioned this. No? He tried to explain God, but in the end he came to the thing it was unexplainable. No? Because reason opened the duality, and for the comprehension of unity, there's no way through duality. No? You can come only to it through a heart vision, because unity happens in the heart. No? This is a very main author in Islam, which is this the 850th centenary now, which is Ibn Arabi. He was a Sufi author, Spanish born in Murcia, and then he was the most open one and the most respected one, because he's respected in all the traditions. In the Shi'i tradition, he's very much respected. In the Ottoman Caliphate, all his books were respected. He wrote about 300 books, and he was a real Muslim and a real Sufi. He accomplished every law, but he was the most open-minded one, and he admitted every religion as every believance as a real believance, and he certifies this till the day of today. In the intolerance Muslim countries, his books are forbidden. Now, for example, in Saudi Arabia, if you go with an Ibn Arabi book, you will be thrown out because it's heretic. He opens the way of the heart and the way of love. No? He said, my heart, my religion is the religion of the heart. My heart is the temple of idols, is the synagogue for Jews, is the church of Christians, and is the Kaaba. For Muslims, this happens in my heart. He being a very tough Muslim, he said this. No? And in Sufism, he's the main author. No? Before him, he was also Al-Ghazali. He was almost contemporary of Averroes, no? Which is also a main thinker in Islam. Al-Ghazali, Ibn Arabi, another Spanish one, Abu Madian. He was from Sevilla, and he went to Maghreb, to Morocco. He died there, and he opened also a lot of knowledge to this. Very famous Rumi, Jalaluddin Rumi, also Sufi one, through the Masnevi, but his way of telling is more through stories and poems. Attar, Fariduddin Attar, very, very important one. This is about the language of birds. This is a very famous book, the story of birds, the the birds they talk about, they are going in a travel, they go to heaven. And a very important book, which is not a religious book, but opened really the fountain of literature about since the 16th, 17th century, is 1001 Nights. This is like the well of stories. When a writer doesn't know what inspiration comes to him, he opens the 1001 Nights, and something will come to him to open story, to open something. And this book is really based in Islam. No? It's absolutely about the genius stories, the hidden cities, about all the magic in religion happens in the 1001 Nights. And still today, you know, they are making a new editions, re-editions, and it's the fountain of literature and of really the believers, sometimes talking about God or not, of genius, of imagination. Really, imagination is a gift also to us to live in reality. As one of the ones before here was saying, the only way, the only hope is to be in sainthood or an artist. No, it's Even Al-Arabi, he opened a huge door to understanding all the beliefs in perfection. He said that to be alive in this world is really a miracle, a gift, no? And it's all in beauty and truth, even the horrible and the destructive part of divinity, because always it's been this question, and which has been also a door for atheism. No? If God is good, why badness? How a creator can create a world where there's destruction, illness, death, and let's say the dark part or the painful part of existence, it opens like a big question. But it's also, as the divine is infinite, in his infinity is also the terrible part of it. And even its beauty. In a rotten apple, you can see beauty. I don't know if in a dead person, you can also see beauty in a volcano destruction, in a big wave, a tsunami. It's horrible, it's killing, but in the hugeness of the wave, there's also beauty. And the only way of comprehension this is it comes that there should be a big order on top everything, which is including every little disorder. It takes part in a big perfection. Let's say every imperfection, it's in the bigness of perfection. In a way of knowing divinity in Islam is also through the 99 attributes of divinity, which is the majesty and the beauty, no? Jalal and Jamal. There are many dual ways in knowing the Zahir and Batin, which is evident and the hidden, the names of divinity. There are many duals like this, no? The contractor and the expansion. Kabid al-Basit, no? The one who contracts and the one who expands. The expansion of the universe, it's very clear because every galaxy, everything is expanding, our mind is expanding, but the contraction, the infinity of contraction is also existing, going backwards to the origin, going backwards to the point. There are many dualities like this, multiplicity and oneness is the mystery of being, no? The mystery of oneness, which never can be reached through our mind, no? This is why almost all the Muslim literature is in a irrational way, in irrational explaining the Quran and coming through emptiness, no? To be like the only way of knowing the huge thing is coming a zero, no? To be nothing when you become nothing. This is in all the mystic literature and all in the mystic way, is to come nothing to be everything. The way to know is to be Atheism is to be a self, a egoist, to be nothing, to be a zero. And Islam is a way like this. It's a way to surrender in totality, to be nothing, to be innocent in life, to try to be open to the marvel of every second happening. So I didn't mention my time is going away. I didn't mention the Muslim atheists, but anyway, I can tell them the names now. Al-Waraq, Al-Rawandi, Al-Mari. This Mari also he's the one who opens also for Dante the Divine Comedy, because he makes like a trip himself to the hell and to the heavens. No? But these ones, they base themselves in Diagoras, Democritus, this Greek atheists. No? All the thing comes from the Western tradition. Anyway, to go to a conclusion, because I think my time is going, no? And to go backwards where I began, to the La ilaha, there's no God really, and it's really this La ilaha, this not to be God, is that there's no possibility of any idea of God, of any rationality of the divinity. So in this thing, the Muslims, we are atheists. We cannot imagine any image of God or any idea of God or any perspective of divinity to be something. So when we say illallah, to open to the divinity, then we open to the unknown and to the reality happening in every second. So this is the reduction of all idolatry, and this is an atheism who opens and prepares to the total conscience, no? to the true reality which is happening now.
Thank you to Abdul Wahid for this journey, this Sufi journey.
Sufi journey of the soul.
Of the soul. We go now to Professor Feliciana, Dr. Feliciana Merino. She's a philosopher also. She has a background in gender studies, and she's the director of Mayan Institute in Granada, and she's part of this international academy. She's going to talk about Wittgenstein as a philosopher, and this, well, not dualism, with faith and reason. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, all. I would like to thank the Religion in the Shaping of European Cultural Identity project, and also the Blanquerna Observatory, especially to Miriam Diaz for the invitation to be here today. Let me apologize because although the seminar is about atheism and literature, I will talk about the experience of being an atheist woman who did a vital and existential path from atheism to mysticism, which is indeed an experience from the abandonment of the religious practice, which had become the most recent inheritance from of enlightened rationalism, to conversion to the Catholic faith. Ateísmo. Ateísmo was a philosopher, Jew, teacher, convert, mystic, and she died in Auschwitz, and she has been declared as a co-patroness of Europe. In this seminar is so very, very important. When John Paul II, in his letter Spes Aedificandi, proclaimed Ateísmo as a co-patroness of Europe, did it with the conviction that Christianity played a crucial and decisive role in European history and culture, established on the firm foundation of the classical heritage and the multiple contributions of the various ethnic and cultural streams. But he was also aware that the modern and contemporary world is characterized by the progressive fragmentation and secularization of a culture alien to the experience of faith. In the 20th century began a race to secularization that reached all corners of public and private life. It was a turbulent century, contradictory, marked by the immense shame of the Shoah, a turning point for every man, believer or not. After the Nazi extermination of 6 million Jews, the recurring question was, where is God? That is, where is God at such barbarism? However, the real question, which can be answered by the testimony of Edith Stein, is not where is God, but where is man? What constitutes the essence of his humanity? The best answer to skepticism and anxiety is that of those like Edith Stein, who show with his example and life that there is still hope. In the words of John Paul II, Edith Stein is the symbol of a human, cultural, and religious pilgrimage which embodies the deepest tragedy and the deepest hopes of Europe. Hence, her search for truth, her entire life as a thinker, her contribution towards building a kind of bridge between her Jewish roots and her commitment to Christ, or her dialogue with contemporary philosophical thought, an intuitive and real dialogue between moderns and classics, between philosophy and theology, can be offered as a model path to help Europe to reflect on its own past, present, and future. Her originality is to admit herself dependent, but dependent on whom? First, on her friends. She had many friends, Christians, Jews, Protestants. With all of them, she talked about, questioned, and if necessary, asked for guidance on the direction of her research. She gave her works to be read those of other fellows, and discussed them in conversations and by correspondence. Her method was unchangeable. She never left it apart in order to feel herself less dependent and therefore apparently freer. Her method has a high value, that of reminding us what the true vocation of the philosopher is, of all men indeed, that of bringing back again issues that have not yet been resolved, but whose answers have the great merit of making us aware of the inevitability of the problems themselves. The path of Stein is worth remembering time and time again. Why? Because for her research work, she used all the methods known to her. This fact shows a reason not close to any of the elements of reality, but on the contrary, open to all of them, knowing that the multiplicity of methods suggests a multiplicity of real objects and hence a broader and richer reality and also reason. Edith Stein is a disciple of Husserl and therefore hires of his phenomenology. However, as noted by Walter Redmond, she did something unusual among philosophers. She did not stay within her own philosophical school, but she compared it with another. It is difficult for a philosopher to go out from the intellectual environment in which he was born and has been philosophically developed, delving into the depths of another philosophical, distant, difficult, and different universe, and aiming to see, after all, what might be true and common or different and rare in both methods. That can only happen if the philosopher is very humble and aware of his own ignorance. Ateistine feels herself capable of studying another tradition, that is to say, Thomism. Her love of truth moves her forward. She is aware that perhaps she may be grown in the understanding of the foundations and principles of Thomism. However, she maintains the attitude of someone who recognizes not knowing everything, having not covered everything, and thus having not narrowed down the road. Many people have criticized her approach to the Thomistic philosophy as a mere consequence of her conversion process. However, there are two objections to this criticism. The first one, she could have been converted and not having to immerse herself in the Thomistic tradition, insofar as modern philosophy had a vision on the relationship between reason and faith that made Christian philosophers not suitable interlocutors, and Edith Stein was modern and also philosopher at the same time. The second one, even before she had converted, her questions and inquiries marked a direction of interest not limited to the interest of phenomenology, but quite the opposite. Her intellectual pursuit was the consequence of a deeper existential search, which is why she did not remain locked in the phenomenological intellectual universe. It was Stein who perceived that modernity splits reason and faith, philosophy and theology. Quoting her, the modern thought, detached from tradition, is characterized by its emphasis on the problem of knowledge instead of being, and by its breaking the link with faith and theology. However, she continues defending the way of modernity, saying that modern philosophy, in its own way, sought for and served the problem of being by recuperating the Greek philosophical principles. The problem of modernity is the rejection of the revealed truth, limiting itself to the natural light of reason and renouncing to go beyond the natural and material world of experience. In its claim to be an autonomous science, modern reason has been reduced to very narrow margins. In this way, scholastic philosophy, considered as philosophia perennis, was relegated, on a Stein vision, to be a private doctrine of Catholic faculties and seminaries. In Stein's words, as a rigid system of notions that have been transmitted from one generation to another as an inanimate property. The Catholic intellectual life had become heavily dependent on modern intellectual life, and it had lost the link with its great past. By putting all its efforts into recovering reason, modernity reduces reason to a very small and limited academic world. Scholastic becomes thus a dead testimony of an old past, losing its inner dynamism to generate new and fertile philosophical outbreaks. For philosophy, it is essential to be aware of the value of its past, without fossilizing it. To wonder, present in man as a living experience, comes from reality and then refers to the past. In this sense, Edith Stein does a valuable attempt to recover the tradition without giving up the positive elements that modernity has brought along. Above all, paying more attention to the self and to the self-experience. Phenomenology is, in the middle of the modernity crisis, an attempt to return to the things in themselves, an attempt to recover the sense of being. That is the reason why Edith Stein believed that it is possible to establish a link between contemporary and scholastic philosophy, between tradition and modernity. So, I quote, the old, constantly renewed and never fully resolved question about the ens and the ousia itself. End of the quote. This is just the desirable consequence to join the classical realism and its primacy in being with a modern focus on the individual and individuality, both of them very important issues in the theory of knowledge and also in Edith Stein's own vital experience. The value of her philosophy is much more than to put both streams into dialogue. Its value lies precisely in having made a philosophical road, which is also an existential journey, open to different disciplines and also to theology. For theology is an open discipline insofar as it has been historically developed as an intellectual and progressive interpenetration of tradition and revelation. In Stein's words, theology does not cover the infinite fullness of divine truth. God communicates himself to the human spirit to the extent and in the manner dictated by his own wisdom. Philosophy is, for Edith, and fortunately for many other philosophers, an ongoing search for truth, an endless task on the basis that human reason, against the modern conception, is dependent, is historical, and limited. And thus, we know the truth, but only in fragments, not entirely. This can set philosophy safe from its own self-sufficiency, thinking that it is possible to grasp the ultimate fundamental explanation of reality. Such fragments of truth are discovered by man throughout history. She says, I quote, "The languages are developed in the spirit of peoples as a result and expression of life, so the people's diversity and particularity must be reflected in them." It might seem that this view of philosophy, such an hermeneutic sense, means to defend the relativity of truth. But languages, as she says, are true to the extent that they refer to objects, and therefore objects constitute the degree to establish whether speeches are true or not. The fact that objects do establish the rule is what we really call method. That is to say, the mode of intellect leading itself to things, where the object gives the method to be followed and not the other way around. However, there are certain objects, such as mathematical objects, which do not require acceptance by the subject, which are not affected by subjective interpretations. But many other objects, most of them non-empirical, are indeed affected by cultural perspectives and subjective positions and do require a different methodology in order to draw our attention to them. For example, issues like education, the relationship between individual and community, or between Jews and Christians, or the dignity of woman, all of them areas of interest in Edith Stein's thought and life. In conclusion, we can look at Edith Stein as a model for an increasingly disrupted Europe. Her testimony entails an attitude that goes beyond our traditional modern European philosophical positions. Her testimony is a reflection on truth, considered as a sign that reveals itself to the human being according to his history, being aware of having just pieces of a bigger truth that we all seek. This is the real attitude that can give philosophy its leitmotif back. Thank you very much.
For this class with Edith Stein's work, life, and experience. Now we jump from a philosopher to another philosopher. We jump to Professor Joan Vergés. He's the director of Cátedra para Ateísmo Chair in the University of Girona, and he comes also from philosophy, political philosophy, and he's going to deal with more than Machiavelli, if the Presley or PowerPoint works.
Where is it? Where is this Mac thing? Subscribe.
Yes.
Might be.
Let's find. Is it a Prezi or a?
Prezi. Fatim's gonna faig servir aquest Max.
This is Blanquero?
No,
That's mine. You can do mine if you want.
Oh, is it yours?
Do you accept the challenge?
Yeah, I would love that.
So first you explain what I was meaning to play.
You come after the coffee break.
Potser aquest d'aquí, algun d'aquests? No.
Prezi?
Aquest sí.
Listen.
Exacte. Molt bé.
Okay, but
This one.
to have it bigger,
Presentation, yeah.
this one.
Okay.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Miriam, for having invited me to this seminar. And since the time, the last of this intervention is such a short time, I will go directly. Instead of constructing an argument, I will feel myself as being simply a messenger, transmitting you a message. So I don't know to what extent I will be capable of grounding my thesis on reasons rather than just merely presenting a thesis. I'd like to draw your attention. The aim of my talk is to defend the thesis, the message, that there are two important books in our tradition that have helped creating what we might call the European spirit or the European essence, in a sense. These two books are The Prince by Machiavelli and Utopia by Thomas More. Both books generated a genre. They created a literature genre. That's why I thought that these two books might be interesting for this seminar, because the subject of this seminar is literature and atheism. So these two books created a genre, and they both appeared. They were both written practically at the same time. The Prince in 1513 and Utopia in 1515, the second half of the book Utopia. So actually we are in the 5th century it will, this year, 2015, will be the 500th year of Utopia, the main part of Utopia, that is the second half of the book. I will take these two books as foundational texts of the European project, precisely because of its way of dealing with religion. That's my message. That's the thesis I'm going to try to defend in a very, I would say, precarious way. First of all, before going directly to the message, to the thesis, I will have to make two preliminary, I would say, somewhat controversial caveats. The first one is that I will take Europe as meaning what Edmund Husserl said of Europe, that is that Europe is the desire to live through a free configuration of its own existence, of its historical life, by reference to the idea of reason and of infinite enterprises. That is, Europe is not merely a geographical, geopolitical thing, reality, but above all, mainly is an idea, a project, a spiritual reality. That's my first caveat. One might find this controversial. Many other people don't find this idea controversial. I'm going to take it as not being too much controversial in order to take it as a kind of a premise of what I'm going to say. And the second caveat or caution is the way I'm going to use and understand the word and the concept of atheism. I will understand it in at least two senses. If we take P as God exists, and C as I believe, the function of belief, the believer might be taken as that person who asserts CP, that is, I believe in that God exists. The atheist, which what we might call the atheist, is that person who believes that God does not exist. But then we have another, at least two more possibilities, which are the atheist by default, what I'm going to call the atheist by default, and then we also have the agnostic. The atheist by default is that person who doesn't believe that God exists. This is different from saying, I believe that God does not exist. That's why I use propositional logic here. And the agnostic is that one who doesn't believe that God exists, but at the same time, doesn't believe that God does not exist. The agnostic has in this sense, as you see, has a different kind of epistemological burden. It is on the agnostic, there is a kind of epistemological burden different from the believer and the atheist. The challenge, the epistemological challenge posed by the believer and the atheist is different from the kind of epistemological challenge that an atheist by default and an agnostic have to face. This is, I would say, quite interesting to remark. And I think in this field, in the field of religious studies, these differences are not always clearly cut and made, and that causes a lot of confusion. That's why I thought it might be interesting to introduce them. Well, in my view, Europe nowadays is mainly an atheist by default place. Although, according to the polls, for example, 2012 Eurobarometer poll, less than 21% of people declare themselves to be either atheist in the first sense, or atheist by default, or agnostic. Why do I say? I think there's something that polls don't capture from reality, from sociological reality. When you ask someone whether she believes in God or not, the person will tend to answer by saying either yes or not. Though, so they will say, I will believe in God, I don't believe in God. Some people might not even consider that question ever in their life, but once you ask me, then I might say, okay, I believe something, that there must be something. Now that you are putting me that question, I am considering that, yes, that might be when I was a young person. Well, yes, cannot be that there is nothing but mere matter. But what reality shows, and by reality I mean how people behave, what reality shows is that people can live absolutely without God in their lives. People live, society works, we don't need, and I take this we as our society, doesn't need at all to consider the hypothesis God in order to make society work. So people, individuals, behave as if they were never considering the question that these kind of polls will pose them. They never consider whether God exists or not when it comes to make a decision, an important decision in their lives. They don't consider whether God exists or not when it comes to vote on an election. They never consider what kind of answer should they give to the question of whether God exists or not when they are deciding which career they would like to have in their lives. So that brings me to remark, to kind of stress that we should say that there are at least two ways of understanding the verb to believe. One sense is I call here the mentalist sense, in the sense that I believe because I have the propositional attitude of considering the truth or falsity of a proposition. So I believe, we are in faculty of Blanquerna. So we might consider this proposition as being true or false. And if we really take that proposition into consideration, then we are having a mentalist belief with relation to this belief. But then there is another way of understanding the verb and the function belief, which is the pragmatist way. And this is how I think we should take the idea of belief into consideration when we are considering the question of whether our societies, European societies, are more atheist or more believers than they used to be. Because if we take belief, the verb and the idea of belief, to believe, in this pragmatist sense, then we get to the conclusion I was already announcing, that, well, the European societies live as if God did not exist, for the most part, as societies. This is important part of it. Not as individuals, some individuals might, but as societies. Europe is not an individual. Europe is a political thing, a political and ideological thing. Europe can live perfectly without taking into consideration the theological question, whether there is a God or not. Well, we have reached to this point. We live in this atheism by default situation in Europe. That's my thesis. Partly, and I would say that this partly has to be understood in a quite substantive and substantial way, thanks to books, texts such as The Prince and Utopia. And the rest of the talk will be devoted to try to defend why. We know what The Prince is about. We know the subject matter of The Prince. We can find it, we know it because we know it because the book is quite easy to read. The print is very clear. The terms, the concepts don't seem difficult for our comprehension. And we even have a letter from Machiavelli to his friend Francesco Vettori, in which he explains to his friend while in exile. As you know, Machiavelli had to be in exile when the Florentine Republic fell, and because of the Medici's seizing again power in Florence, and he was exiled. He lived out of the walls in a village close to Florence, but he was in exile, and there, in order to kill time, he started writing and reading, and in a very nice letter written to his friend Francesco Vettori, he explains what he's doing. Well, how long?
You have time.
Have time. I cannot help but reading, since this is on literature and atheism, I cannot help but reading you a fragment of it. What my life is, and this is what he writes to his friend Francesco Vettori. What my life is, I will tell you. I get up at sunrise and go to a grove of mine, which I am having chopped down. I spend a couple of hours there, checking up on the work of the previous day, and passing the time with the woodcutters, who are never without some trouble or other, either among themselves or with the neighbors. They are always arguing. Then he explains how he goes to an inn. There I generally find he goes to an inn, drink and talk to other people. There I generally find the innkeeper, a butcher, a miller, 2 kiln tenders. In their company I idle the rest of the day away, playing at cricket and trick-or-trudge, games that give rise to a host of quarrels, cutting remarks and insults. Often we fight over a penny and are heard yelling as far off as San Cacciano, which set down among these lies, this is how I keep the mouth from my brain and find release from Fortune's malice, because he's in exile. I am content to have her beat me down this way to see if she won't become ashamed. At nightfall, this is how he kills time during the day. He goes to his grove, he discusses with woodcutters, and then he goes to the inn, he drinks, he plays cards, and well, he's a normal person. But at nightfall, this is a Renaissance person, a Renaissance intellectual, I might say. At nightfall, I return home and enter my study. There on the threshold, I remove my dirty, mud-spattered clothes, sleep on my regal and curly robes, and thus fittingly attired, I enter the ancient courts of bygone men, where having received a friendly welcome, I fit on the foot that is mine alone and that I was born for. I am not ashamed to speak with them and inquire into the reasons for their actions, and they answer me in kindly fashion. And so for 4 hours, I feel no annoyance. I forget all troubles. Poverty holds no fears, and death loses its terrors. I become entirely one of them. And since Dante says that there can be no knowledge without retention, I have set down what I have gained from their conversations and composed a little book, De Principatibus, in which I probe as deeply as I can into the subject, discussing what a principality is, what kinds there are, how they are won, how they are maintained, and why they are lost. So the subject matter is quite clear. Well, this is what just in order to have a literative taste. The subject matter is quite clear. However, this is not the subject matter. How he dealt with the subject matter, what he said of the subject matter, didn't give Machiavelli fame and a place in universal history. But the way of dealing with this subject matter, this is what made Machiavelli famous and important. That is what brought him to give birth to a new genre, the genre of the books on the raison d'etat. This is how the way he deals with the subject. This is what made this book interesting. This is what makes this book interesting. I deem it is best to stick to the practical truth of things rather than to fancies. This is what we find in chapter 15. Many men have imagined republics and principalities that never really existed at all. Yet the way men live is so far removed from the way they ought to live that anyone who abandons what it is, what is for what should be, pursues his downfall rather than his preservation. So this way of dealing with political subjects, forgetting about the moral and the religious point of view, this is what made this book something extraordinary at that time, and what still today makes it an extraordinary piece of work in political text. He says about religion in this book something which actually was already shared by other authors in antiquity, but and that's what he was discussing when he entered his study, after discussing and drinking with friends, with ancient authors. Religion is an instrumentum regni. Religion is nothing but an instrumentum in order to govern people. And the princess, governance should take that into account and have it as one of the first important truths to take into consideration. Religion is very useful in order to make people be quiet and obedient. And this is so even to the extent that in those places where those principalities, such as the ecclesiastical principality, where religion is the main clue that makes people go together, there in these places, no matter what the prince makes, no matter what the prince does, these principalities can still be maintained and governed and controlled by the prince, because he has the best instrument in his hands possible, which is nothing but religion. This is how he dealt with the issue of religion, taking this perspective completely immanentist perspective of dealing with political subjects, forgetting completely the religious and moral perspective. More, while writing Utopia, a book he wrote at the same time, there is a controversy on how we should understand, how we should interpret and read Utopia, as you know. There are two books in this book. There are two parts in this book. The first part is nothing but a Platonic dialogue, leading to no conclusion, actually, but leading to the first part, this dialogue among where there is this character Raphael Nonsense, or Hitlerdeus, and Peter Gilles, and other people, and a character called Thomas More himself. So and there is a dialogue, and the main subject of this dialogue is whether how could we make our societies better places? How could we improve from a moral point of view, from a morally political point of view, our societies? England is full of troubles. Society is on the verge of a crash, and we should do something. They are worried about the English society. And Peter Hillodeus, this Portuguese sailor who has traveled to the New World and who has come back, he has been with Americo Vespucci, traveling in the New World. He says, look, I have the solution to your problems, to the social problem and political problems in England. The solution is nothing but, not that the philosophers should reign, that the philosophers should govern. This is the Platonic solution, but another kind of solution, which is nothing but, we might call it communism, an early form of communism. You'll never get a fair distribution of goods or a satisfactory organization of human life until you abolish private property altogether. That's what Raphael Nonsense ends up saying at the end of the first half of the book. And then, in order to prove this sentence, this thesis, he explains what he has experienced, what he has seen in the New World while visiting Utopia, this fantastic place, this fantastic city, this fantastic island, where everyone is happy. And one, I will end here. One of the important elements in Utopia is how they treat the role of religion in Utopia. The leading principle concerning religious matters in Utopia is toleration, religious toleration. Utopos, the person who founded Utopia a long time ago, he found this principle to be fundamental. This principle dates, I quote, this principle dates right back to the time of the conquest, when they conquered the island and constructed Utopia. Up till then, there had been constant quarrels about religion. This will be Europe in some years to come after the publication, the coming out of the book. This was written in 1516, and religious wars were on the verge of being desolating Europe. Up till then, there had been constant quarrels about religion, and the various warring sects had refused to cooperate in the defense of their country. When Utopos heard how they had behaved, he realized that this was why he'd been able to conquer the whole lot of them. He saw that he had succeeded in conquering the island because there had been the indigenous people had been quarreling on religious issues for many years. They hadn't been united. So in order to have the Utopians united, he established the principle of religious toleration. Utopos made this law not only to preserve the peace and the unity of the people of Utopia, which he saw being completely destroyed by endless disputes and implacable feuds, but also because he thought it was in the best interest in religion itself. We have here the liberal principle. So religious tolerance is good for political aims, it's good for political reasons, above all, but it is also good for religious reasons, for reasons that have to do with the true way of understanding, the truly way of understanding the true religious experience. And the true religious experience has to do with letting individuals make their own path to religious truth. This is what, I will not read this, but this is what we find here following this fragment I've just read, where he defends that any kind of religion is tolerated in Utopia, though most religions that one can find in Utopia tend to coincide on some aspects to the extent that they can even share the same public spaces, the same buildings. They can pray and they can celebrate their festivities in the same buildings, because they all tend to admit some fundamental creeds, dogmatic issues on the whole. For example, the existence of a God. Well, my view is, I stop here. I think these two books, Utopia, which generated the genre, which founded the genre of utopias. This book and the first one, The Prince, they both in different ways created the atmosphere, created the conditions for us having the kind of Europe as an intellectual project we nowadays have. In my view, a place where God is not important from a political and a sociological point of view. That has nothing to do with the issue of whether God is important or not for individuals. Actually, what Europe means is that we can build, we can create a common society, a common place, just by thinking over it, and without having to take into consideration a revealed word, something that might come from a transcendent place. We don't need. There might be a coherence between what the transcendent God tells us to do and what we finally think we have to do. That might be. The true society, the happy society, will be for many authors. The true and happy society will be that society where this coherence between what God says and what we end up believing, this society where there is a connection, there is a coherence between transcendence and immanence. But what I think is fundamental in Europe is the idea that apart from the problem of whether there is truly this coherence between transcendence and immanence, we can solve political and sociological society problems, social problems, just by thinking over them, just by posing them in immanence terms. This is what The Prince shows, this is what actually The Prince shows, tries to show, and this is what actually we can see and we can read from Utopia. In Utopia, there is not. In Utopia, the utopians believe not in they don't believe in Christianity, which is the true religion, obviously to the times. But they have, in a non-Christian society, they have end up having the happy society. In quite contrast, in clear contrast to what we have in Christian countries. So God is absolutely out of the picture. We don't need, as Laplace will say to Napoleon, I haven't taken that hypothesis into consideration. We don't have to take God as a hypothesis into consideration when facing the issue of political morality, when we are facing the question of how should we organize the structure of our societies. Well, thank you very much.
I think you could stay here, and I will invite both of you to join him for a brief discussion before our break. I think we still have maybe, if you can join also with Ferry. I think it's okay. Who wants to open the floor? I have a question for you, Juan. I was thinking about the Charlie Hebdo scenario and the things that you were explaining how can we think of religion when things like that happen in the current Europe? Is all that we have explained something to really not to take into account? Have we the idea of constructing this Europe without religion, because religion is something that bothers society? Do you really think that society in Europe can be thought without this?
Two things here. One thing is to take religion into consideration from a sociological and socio-political point of view. That is, there are people who believe, there are religious communities. This is a fact. A similar fact, a fact which has to affect Europe because, well, it is there. This is one thing. And another thing is, how should we deal with these facts? And I think the first step is to admit, to accept, to be sincere and say, look, there are these things, people who believe in God. And the second step has to do with how are we going to deal with the plurality, the plurality that emerges when we let people believe whatever they wish to believe concerning transcendental issues. And here, I think we all agree, considering that there is a plurality of confessions, a plurality of religious communities. Where there is a controversy is how are we going to deal with this fact? How should we face, in institutional terms, this fact? And the European solution, I think, that's what I was. The European solution, I think, is the solution of saying, look, this fact, religious plurality, has to be dealt with in a similar way, in the exactly as many other plural phenomena we have concerning art, concerning ways of living. Religion is nothing but a way of living. It's nothing but an option. It's merely a personal option. This is I think, this is the European solution to the problem of religion and politics. Religion is not something that we should take into consideration from the start when we are arranging the institutional structure of our societies. Religion is nothing but an individual option by the citizens of a state. This is what actually the people who attacked Charlie Hebdo were questioning, I think. Religion is not, it is not merely a private affair. It is a public affair beyond what it means for us being a public affair when we consider that each citizen should have the right to free confession. And this is, I don't know where I succeeded in explaining.
That we are more closer to utopia or to the prince in the solutions that we can have?
Both things.
Both.
I would say that in the European soul, both books are still important. Both books are still in place and being applied. The prince identifies one tendency in European political thought, in Western political thought, that is the tendency of realism, political realism. Utopia might be taken as one exemplar of what we might call idealism. And European Western political thought is an area where there are these two extremes. There is a tension between these two extremes, but these two books, these two elements, these two poles set the frame of our thought. But this frame excludes other ways of seeing politics. And
Well, listening to you, I was imagining Syriza leaders and Podemos leaders reading Utopia and applying some of the principles to its way of saying how religion has to be organized in society, not bothering but present, but in dealing with this.
might be instrumentum regni. But the different possibilities, either the only instrumentum regni or something to take into account, something to use in order to govern.
Yes, but present in the sense of not absent from the discourse or from the public debate.
No. It is a reality, and it can be in the public sphere, but it doesn't lead us to the solution, to the conclusion, to how we should deal with the political.
Okay, I have a question for our Muslim friend. For me, it's a great experience to listen to you talking about God, because I'm sure this experience of God, experience of the faith into the world, is the real experience of the Christian and maybe of all of the religious people. That's why I think it's so difficult to be a real atheist. All my life I've wanted to be atheist, but it's very difficult because I will have to reject all my experience of life and of the reality. For me, that is not an option. Like 2 and 2 are 4 is not an option for my reasons. Then I'd like to ask you, how is it possible to be atheist? Which is the right way? Do you have any idea about that? And another question is, maybe the problem doesn't be if God exists or not, but if I like the idea that I have of God, by society, by philosophy, by theology, etc. What do you think about this possibility? Sorry for 2 questions.
Yeah, well, the first thing, I think it's in the word existence and essence. If you look at Latin, ex estare is to be out of it. No? Ex is out, and ex estare is to be out of existence, really, to be out of essence. No? We could say existir or be or essence, no? Existence or essence. No? So the question, if God exists, it really doesn't exist because He is. He's not in existence, He's in being. No? So this click is the thing. No? And then to be atheist or not atheist and to limit your beliefs, I would say, Alhamdulillah, we are in this utopia and principle, and we are free, no? Which is we are Europeans, and that's why we can be here also talking about atheism or theism, no? Which is freedom, opportunity to have this issue. No? If we should be in an intolerant government, this couldn't be. No? So this would be an imposition which we are in Europe, and we are free in the freedom of beliefs and in the freedom of any way. So you can link yourself to your ideas. You know, this is what I was saying about even Arabi. No? He opens the possibility. He goes even to say that in His Majesty, God admits any beliefs, not even polytheism, idols, and atheism. It's all happening. So it's in His opening, with His infinite opening, that you can be anything. You can believe anything or limit yourself to anything. But He is unlimited. So even He is unlimited and He has no form, even He takes any form. Because we are forms. It's also said, not in every book, not that we were created in His shape. So He manifests Himself in any shape. He's taking shapes to know Himself. This is what is said. So we are free in a way, no, to believe what we can believe or what we want to believe. We are free in utopia to be also in any beliefs, no, and we hope to continue like this, no, to not get any imposition about, you know, if you can draw or not draw any caricature, or you can, you know, this is absurd, no? This is a way, no, to these intolerant regimes, no, imposing the thing. So we hope we can continue in the freedom of beliefs and in our opening of conscience.
You speak like the atheist was a theological option, a religious.
To be a religious option?
Yes, I understand this, or not?
Why not? Why not? A religious
Alternative
option
theology.
well, it's a way of being. You can be in life as you can, believing or not believing. No one is asking you if you are or not. As we are living in this utopia, I'm not asking anyone, are you believing or not believing? What do you believe or not believe? No. And I'm not judging or accusing anyone of what's believing. No. So you are in the freedom of your, I think it's a question of your opening of consciousness. What you can realize in life. What you can realize in life. You take the option, say, I am atheist, I don't believe in anything. Yes, be. No. I can say like this, no? I don't know if I answered your question.
I would like to ask you, because I am not sure if you really agree with the Machiavelli's conception of politics when you've said that contemporary societies that don't need God in their way of living or dealing with religion, but not as a way of deciding how to deal with public or political things. So I'm not sure. I don't think that we can talk about politics as a way, as a very different way of thinking about reality without God. Because for me, politics is also a theological option, whether Christian, whether not Christian, or I think if religion is a way of living, also politics is a way of living, but politics has to do with goods, with human being, with a concept of truth, a concept of justice or toleration or good itself. So it is difficult to think about politics without doing a reflection, which is indeed philosophical and theological, about all of these questions. So I don't really know if you agree with this conception of Machiavelli about the way of we construct Europe in this secularized world, because I think secularization is a modern way of having separated public and private life. So God is not public; is private, and is due to the illumination that God is something that doesn't configure our thought about reality, and I don't think so. I don't know what you think about it.
You don't think so?
I don't think that we can see
detach the public
yes,
from the private,
yes, yes,
and the religious thing from the political thing.
Yes, and I don't think that we can separate in modern societies or in contemporary societies that we can see that there is a difference between public world and private world, and that when I say I believe in God, that is something something that has to do only with my private way of being, because God has to do with how we understand politics, goods, justice, toleration, truth, and many other things when we do politics. So I don't think this can really.
But that's what we think. I don't think it is the dominant view in European political thought. And here we might draw a difference between European political thought and American political thought. When Bush gathered his committee before deciding
Iraq.
yeah, he asked the members of the committee to pray, and it is quite common for the. So I would say there is a difference between America and Europe, and I would say that Europe is precisely fundamentally, in principle, secularized. The tendency to secularization, I would say, is embedded in some fundamental text of what Europe is about. And Europe is an idea, it's not a history. It's not we cannot understand Europe by looking at merely the history of Europe. We cannot understand Europe in this sense by looking at the map. Europe is an idea. And I would say that
not only because Europe is also a history, and the roots of Europe are basically Christians, Jews and Christians, and we can not reject of this real tradition, which is in the past. So I think that when we talk about Europe as an idea, that is only the result of looking at Europe throughout the eyes of modernity. And Europe is not only Europe cannot be only looked at through modernity, because the past of Europe is very big. So I would
put it in the following terms. Europe consists of the project of abandoning Christianity as merely a cause of its present reality, and Europe consists of taking Christianity, its historical background, as merely a cause of what Europe is about today. But it is merely a cause. We admit, some people might say, look, I admit, and there's a moment where we can see that Europe would accept taking Christianity as a cause. Europe is what it is like, thanks to Christianity. But this is one thing. Another thing is that Europe is based, the project of Europe is based upon Christian or religious reasons. When there was this big discussion whether there should be a clause in the European Constitution on the Christian past of Europe, this was, as you know, a quite strong controversy on this subject. Well, most countries, most people rejected introducing this clause in the text that was voted and finally didn't succeed. This clause fell from the text, although many people, most people, accepted that obviously Europe is what it is like, thanks to Christianity. So Christianity is a cause that helps us explaining what Europe is about, but it is not a reason for being European. This is what actually I think was at stake when in Europe there was this discussion concerning the roots, the Christian roots of Europe. This is what I think. And so one thing is admitting that we are Christians, we are Catholics, that we don't understand. If you go out in the street, you don't understand anything. If you don't know anything about religion, you don't understand how the streets are. You don't understand anything. I agree with that. That is one thing. Another thing is that we should base the reasons why we should strive for being Europeans is for religious reasons, for Christian reasons. Actually, I would say Europe consists of abandoning the Christian legacy as a religious legacy and taking Christianity as merely a cultural and a moral thing. That's what I think secularization means. Being capable of, well, we have these two chemical components mixed, and now through a distillation we will have this and that. This is my, and I would say that these two texts have helped in this process, have been quite a help in this process of distillation.
But I would say that modernity or Europe is an attempt to construct Europe by abandoning religious causes. But that's not the reality. Europe is not that. Europe is real. It's not only an idea. And the reason is that people is you can find religious people in everywhere. So and when we do politics, for example, I would ask, can a Christian philosopher or a Christian politic philosopher leave apart his beliefs to do politics? This is possible. It is possible to do that for being European. I think this is an abstraction for me, because you can say that modernity is an attempt to construct a secularized Europe, but inevitably the politics is also an alternative and a theological option also. You cannot leave apart what truth is, what justice, honor, or many other human rights, for example, are a way of looking at Europe from another way of view, but without leaving apart, without abandoning the real beliefs of.
This is what Donald Dworkin once said. You cannot believe a particular tenet of dogmas at home, go out in the street, and abandon those dogmas and those tenets while in the street. That is a schizophrenia, he said. Well, I think the European project is a crazy project in the sense that this is precisely what the European project demands on us. The European project, the European idea consists of, I think, of a dream, of a project of trying to make that possible. Let's try make it possible that people who believe very different things at home, in the church, in the mosque, people who believe very different things while in the private sphere, let's make these very plural demos go together. Let's try to make this possible. This, I think, is the European solution, contrary to the American solution, is not to make religious public. Is the American solution. The purpose is the same. The objective in the American, I would say, is the same. Make this plurality possible. But they try to make it possible by making religion a public thing in a particular sense. That is where's the problem, I think. But the European solution is, let's try to make these people, very plural demos, go together by asking them not to discuss, not to make the religious belief a political thing. In the text of Utopia, in this fragment, Deus talks of a man who tried to convert the people from Utopia to Christianity. Christianity is the true religion, and he very actively he didn't use this word, but he very actively condemned the other confessions as being false. Well, he was jailed and sent to exile because this is not tolerated in utopia. Well, Europe is this kind of utopia, but Europe is also at the same time. There's here why I think these two books are helpful. Europe is this. This is the project, the idea. But Europe is at the same time political practice of using religion for political purposes. In which sense? Well, I would sense in the sense of trying to make this dream, this project possible. This is, I don't know, we might disagree concerning what is Europe about. That's why I said I made this a bit.
There's a question behind there
Yes,
before.
yes, it was.
Thank you. The questions here at stake, probably we should be more precise on defining what's religion, which is not the same thing as Christianity, and even not the church, that church or this other church, whatever denomination you use for it. And also acknowledging that in the last 2 centuries, being religious and trying to be religious on the street has not been very easy in much of the countries of Europe. Just take the story of France, for instance, and it's the story of a state trying to grab, even for the most ridiculous purposes, the property, the schools, the same thing that in that case, the Catholic Church did in France during centuries, trying to grab this to the state just because there was a huge, more inclusive project to do a more just society, etc. So I'm not criticizing this is history. Of course, it has consequences, but I'm not criticizing it. I'm just reminding that there's a huge confrontational history of just to arrive to this, what you, Joan, call European project, which has its own ridiculousness, because in the Lisbon Treaty, which is what we call European Constitution, then it was amended, etc. This is Europe, just kicking the can down the street, just avoiding decisions anyway. That's Europe too, and that happens on the values side. Let's not discuss this. So let's kick the can down the street. So let's not discuss this particular thing about values when life starts. For instance, this and some other issues. Are Christians allowed to show publicly their faith or not? Or Muslims? Do we have to allow them to wear scarves? Things like this. Those are the part of the European project too, and we're in the middle of this mess, just trying to sort out what's gonna be of this crazy project, which I sustain absolutely. But in this constitution, the great classical heritage is acknowledged, and it's not the Christian one, the Christian heritage, which is, I don't know, but sort of same importance or same influence on the building of Europe. So we still the heirs of this 19th century mindset that was not, I don't think it was about Christianity. It was mostly about clericalism. It was mostly about using religion as a political tool to keep people at bay on issues complicated like workers' rights or how society should be organized in many different points, getting out of of the ancien regime, in which apparently Christianity was ingrained and then you couldn't just separate one of another, etc. That mindset still pervades all our discussions. So it's very difficult for anyone who presents himself or herself as a Christian, whatever, Catholic, whatever, to be allowed to have a fair place on the discussion. Because we still take a lot of care and prejudices about the way people reach conclusions and not about the conclusions themselves. So this may go on and on and on and on, but still, if we don't realize that there is no, to me, this is my point. I'm not asking any question. I'm just painting.
I can say something.
My
about
point
the
is,
traditional.
I'm finishing. If we keep discussing these minor issues about public presence, or you say this because you're a Christian, and then it's invalid, things like this, and not what people say, what people do, we can try to, in my opinion, to lie ourselves, like take all these things out, and then we will have a neutral discussion, because it's not going to be neutral. It's going to be half of me discussing, but not my full being. So this is part of the European labyrinth right now. How we sort out this? And
I would like to go and join the three things. I would like to join the three things, no? The three issues what you are telling now, and to join to them, no? Because in the traditional Perennis philosophy, looking at history, no? We are looking at history, and history is happening. It's happening, and we cannot move many things about what is happening. And we have, in Europe, we have the controversial between Ottomans and Christianity, no? With Carolus V and all this Christianity, and then Europe built over Christianity, and then we have the English church, and the Queen, she goes to church, and Westminster, and here the King goes to the... Many things happening, but now our government, European government or American government is laicism, fundamentalism. No, we can call it like this. No, it's a fundamentalismo laicista. No? We are not religious, and we are governed with no religious, but something is governing. No? What is governing behind? Which is the religion governing behind? We don't know. There are many things about this, no, conspiracies and this Illuminati or greed, no, or what's the greed, no, because it's an economical thing in the end, no. But let's see, no, because history is happening. No, then we cannot say, no. But for believers, let's say for religious people, there's one thing in Muslim tradition. It's called baraka. Baraka in Jewish also is beraka, which is the blessing coming from heaven. It has much to do with fertility, with water, with planting, with eating, with children, with all this, with life, real life, no? And the blessing from heavens, no, in all the religions anyway, in the Polynesian islands, on the Utopia, where they're visiting, any way of religious or of spiritual thing, is always asking blessings on nature, no? On happening, no? On families, on health, on food, and all these things. No? So let's see, no? Because history is happening, and we can't really not move many things, no? What is happening. So let's see what's happening now in this secularity, no? Which is coming more and more. No? The Greeks now, the origin of our culture, no? With Pythagoras and all this. Let's see how they govern the world now. With this laicism or communism, or let's see what happens with all this, because we can be only like watchers. No? We can only be watching what is happening. No? Let's see what's happening through this laicism, and how we will call the baraka, the blessing coming from heaven. Let's see how this happens. I don't know if I join the three things.
Yes, because this it's very important the difference. If the society accepts all religions with tolerance, like Utopia, and if the society rejects all religions in the public life, this is not tolerance, I believe. It's very different. If people can believe, can construct schools, universities, etc., with his vision of the world, of the religion, etc., or not.
His religious vision.
Yes,
The problem is when politics has to do with another religious program, alternative, which is atheist, for example, because I think that many comments have to do with a political, a theological option, which is atheist for the politicians, which do not want Muslims to do schools as in a Muslim way, or do not want Christians to build Christian schools, or do not want express with public images our beliefs. So that's why I think that politics has to do with our religious view. No matter what is it, Christian, Muslim, or, I think it's something that goes beyond, because it's something philosophical, or more, still more theological, because you have to do politics with a concept of the world, of reality, and also about God exists or not existed, and thus it has consequences in the public and in the way we live, also politics. I don't. It's difficult.
The state say, I can tolerate all the religion, then all the religion out of the public life. It's like I say to my children, I love all of them, then out of my house. It's incredible. I can understand this position.
You're eating part of our tea break, and it's something European also.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
It's very.
An endless discussion. This is
Continue with the tea.
We continue with the tea, but at 5 o'clock, instead of the tea, we will listen to the 2 last sessions. So we have only 15 minutes to go to the bar together if we want, and we come back. I would like, and any one of you, if you want to join, a picture with our Zeki project. So the people that want the picture here, we can take it now. Do you want all of you to be in the picture or not?
Why not?
Why? No, because if you don't, you take a picture. There's the people. Yes. Okay.
Echamos de menos, we missed Ignacy. What happened?
Ignacy has lessons, yes. Because his duty
Perdón,
as
Bueno, és punts,
és millor que res.
No? Són apunts i és molt... No l'he llegit, simplement era per seguir-me.
Bueno, em sap greu perquè no sé si...
Perquè abans veia les cares.
Sí, hem dit que sí.
És molt simple el que dic. És molt simple el que vull dir. Vull dir que la religió, Europa és un projecte, és una idea, en part d'assimilació i utilització d'atribució de rol per la religió, del fet religiós. Que intenta, diferent del americà, de jugar, de tenir en compte, de tenir-se-la.
Aquí tenim una història molt...
Jo venia a qüestió aquí un judici.
Hem matat tant amb aquest tema.
Té a veure molt amb això. Me gusta aquest tema.
Estic pensant. Perquè jo crec que hem de sortir més cap allà.
Vols que ho traiem?
Ho deixem per després.
Que guai.
Què es diu?
Es diu patata o Lluís o cheese, ja que estem en anglès.
Va, 1, 2.
Riceci. Sí. Riceci.
Està per una mica de
Ai, perdó.
És que ara l'he agafat. Com hem quedat?
Coqueto.
Escrivents com aquesta que de la
Es que yo siempre me cuesta mucho. Pero
Com ara serà un foll.
Sí, però no se puede poner...
Todo en este sentido, no lo pongas en el sentido de las
Perdón,
profesiones.
¿alguien tiene que ir al bar? Podría ir si os acompaño. Un café, un té,
Un café sí,
no,
que
sí, no,
jo m'aniria.
es verdad, porque
Vaig a fer física, igual, i mira les coses.
Ja t'ho...
hay algunos servicios que no tienen nada que ver con las cristianas.
Si quieres explicar estamos,
No, eso no. Pero intenta decir que no es solo de
no, claro que no, tienes que ser
Sí.